Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to get a little further into our topic of this week, anger. For many of us, the word anger evokes an experience of someone acting in a way that is violent, abusive, intimidating, harmful, diminishing, and or destructive. It may be mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, or all of the above. In our world, there are people who, in general, have less permission to be angry. That's women, Christians, people of color. And there are people who have more permission to be angry. Men, often anger is the only emotion that's considered masculine. Anger, when it's on behalf of someone else or on behalf of a worthy cause, also receives a little more permission. But this results in just a lot of obstruction, of anger not being well moved. So I have a friend who is like one of my heroes with anger. She has a PhD. She's ordained. She's a cook. She's a fantastic host. She spends hours just imagining and dreaming about menus and food. So if you're ever lucky enough to get invited to her house, say yes. And she was incarcerated for 30 years. The prison system is a very dehumanizing system. You're called by a number, not a name. You have basically almost no rights, and your boundaries are broken routinely. She told me that her greatest challenge in those 30 years was to figure out how to live within that system, that dehumanizing system that routinely broke her boundaries, and to not get institutionalized, to not internalize the violation and become a number, and also how to do it without getting punished, without being perceived as breaking the rules, which would greatly diminish her chances of parole. She resisted, she pushed into her values and held her boundary a lot through food. So she started to not go to the cafeteria and would make food in her cell. She learned how to make tamales from tortilla chips, from what she had on hand. So she told me how to make a tamale when you don't have masa, you don't have corn husks, you don't have all of these different things. And she began to host potlucks and different gatherings. She got a annual Christmas celebration started that was like the highlight of the year, putting it forth in a way where the warden believed it was his own idea and thought it was pretty cool, when it was really, really her. She said she was so clear in herself with the correctional officers, and they weren't all abusive, just, like in every population, some are good and some are not so good. But she said she came to this clarity of you can't make me hurt, you can't make me hate you. You can't make me act in a way that is not like me towards you. And she came out of prison herself. Anger's job and gifts are values, distinctiveness, protection, and strength. Its title is Honorable Century, and it brings the gifts of honor and conviction, healthy self-esteem, proper boundaries, healthy detachment, protection of self and others. Self and others. Anger and values. We are only angry about things or people or that matter to us. If there's something or someone that doesn't really matter to us, we won't be angry about it. So, for example, if you were to say to me, "You are the worst skier in all of the world," I'd be like, "Yeah, probably so." Like, so what? You clearly, I do not care about skiing. I might wonder if you were really aggressive about it, about why were you so aggressive about it? But it wouldn't really bring my anger up because that doesn't matter to me. But if you were to say to me, "You don't treat other people very well," well, that would raise my anger because that does matter to me. Anger is essentially a relational emotion. We need a self to clearly engage, and that self needs to be protected, needs to be distinctive, and it is in that being appropriately protected, boundaried, that we can take considered risks to be vulnerable. We can be guided by our values in when to be vulnerable. And vulnerability and authenticity are absolutely essential ingredients to meaningful relationship. When you have clear boundaries, you know who you are, it actually tends to calm people down because you're a known entity, you're stable, you have self-knowledge, and you can be counted on to protect others' boundaries in addition to your own. You won't simply stand silently by when others are being violated. And that builds trust and relationship. Anger has a special partnership with shame, and we are going to get into shame more next week. Both of these emotions ideally are guided by our values. Shame is more complex in terms of the values that it can attach to or it can be responding to. But anyway, we'll get to that more next week. But anger keeps an eye on the behavior of other people, and shame keeps an eye on our behavior to live in accordance with our values. And so anger and shame, they're just incredible partners in keeping us upright, in keeping us living boundaried and with integrity, both inside and out. Another emotion that that anger often partners with, especially in this day and age, is panic. So panic is extreme fear, and it is when we perceive that we are actually in danger, that our life is being threatened, that the violation is so serious that we're in danger of death of some kind. And this happens so frequently that language of emotions and the community that surrounds it, called Dynamic Emotional Integration Community, uh, came up with a new word, and that word is panger. So panic and anger together. And there is a lot of panger around now, especially in the United States. When panic is part of a group of emotions, its voice is generally going to be the loudest, and we will need to tend to it first. Because if we don't survive, then nothing else really matters. And that value of survival then can easily and often uh, supersedes any of the relational other values. What we often see as anger is actually um, the fight response of panic. That would be people who are expressors of anger, or those who kind of flood with anger. Or we might see the freeze or possibly the flee response of panic, which then is repression. Expression leads to kind of external chaos and destruction. Repression leads to internal destruction and chaos. Rage almost always includes panic. My story about getting into that van that day I went to get my car serviced, that was repression of panger. I froze and I ran away inside. Now, I had learned to repress everything, really. That's why generally I had a lot of years where I was just emotionally numb, uh, which was an expression of dissociating. But anger was probably pushed down the most. Dissociating, going numb, is a brilliant coping mechanism. It's just not meant to become a way of living. The consequence of repression, and especially chronic repression, is that then we can't be authentic. I was definitely not able to be authentic in that band. We are not able to deal with the issues that are presenting themselves. And we teach the people who dishonor us that it's okay to dishonor others. So I was not able to deal with the issue that came up in that band that day. That kind of that that diminishment of, oh, let's keep the little lady happy. With my silence, I said with my silence that it's okay to treat me that way, to dishonor me, and I believe it furthered that kind of behavior for him of it's okay to treat women that way. So I just named those things just to say that this whole thing around boundaries and anger and all, that there are some really important things at stake here. This emotion has been the toughest for me. I have had to work really, really hard at this. And I have noticed growth in this last year. As I was preparing this material, I was just remembering an interaction with someone who, there was a lot more at stake than, this exchange with a stranger. And I noticed that I was able to stay in the exchange. I was able to be authentic. I was able to ask for time, say, like, I need some time to sit with this, and I will come back to it. And I did come back to it. I say that because I just want to encourage you that this growth in emotions is so possible, because it is really, these emotions are part of our God design. The inherent capacity is in us. And as we keep working at learning it, it will come. It will come. God's design, Jesus is, fully human, fully God. He is the model of full humanness. And he is a model for anger. When he began his ministry, his sermon in Nazareth in Luke 4 was like a beginning of his ministry, his public ministry. And he reads this passage from Isaiah. He was baptized, he was in the wilderness, and then he returned to Nazareth, went to the synagogue, as was his custom. He got up to read, and he unrolled the scroll and came to this passage in Isaiah. And he read that day, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." This is a statement of Jesus' values. I believe that if you follow his journey all the way through the Gospels, through the crucifixion, through the resurrection, that you will see this. You will see the care for the poor, the preaching of the good news, the release of captives, sight to the blind, the year of the Lord's favor, the Jubilee year of the Lord coming. Jesus had really clear boundaries. When you met him, you knew what you were getting. You could count on him to protect not only his own boundaries, but yours. He would not just stand silently by. So, Jesus, model for anger, for channeled being with intention, moving the energy of anger from one place to another, having clarity, having definition, having protection, knowing his strength, and using his strength appropriately. One of my favorite theologians is Walter Brueggemann, and in a book that he wrote, "An Unsettling God, the Heart of the Hebrew Bible," he says, a self that can assert itself is needed to be adequate to the practice of covenant relationship. And the example that came up for me was the story of Abraham pleading with God over Sodom. He goes on to say, without such a self to give, self-denial is likely simply a refusal to live one's life, a refusal to be who you are and to do what is uniquely yours to do. He talks about the tension of self-assertion and submission. Our Jewish ancestors had this in their faith, this tension between self-assertion and submission. And he talks about how, for whatever reason, Christians don't seem to have that tension. Christians have generally leaned more into submission, and they don't hold this tension. But it is in this very tension which does reflect a self that can assert itself, that is needed for the adequate practice of covenant relationship, which God, with deep delight, invites us into. We are learning emotion channeling exercises throughout this course. Last week we learned one which is grounding, and this week we are going to learn another one that is around boundaries. So I hope you will enjoy learning this new channeling practice, and I look forward to reading your posts on the forum and of seeing you on the Zoom.